And welcome to On the Move, a show where we share transportation, sales, and marketing success stories. I'm Jennifer Carpus Romaine, Executive Director at TMSA, which is a trade nonprofit educating and connecting marketing and sales professionals in transportation and logistics. And today I have April Morone on the show, who is Director of Freight Sales and Logistics Operations at GoPro Freight. How are you doing today, April?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. So excited to have you on the show, in large part because you have a really vast experience in the logistics industry. So can you share your origin story with us?
I can. I think my origin story is pretty much like everyone else that you hear from these days, except for younger interns. I kind of fell into logistics on accident. Um, First job was McDonald's. I was there for 6 years. I went into management. I did that whole thing. And then a friend of mine, her dad needed some help. He had a trucking company in Columbus, Ohio, and was talking to me about, dispatching. And I had no idea what any of that stuff meant. So I figured I'd give it a shot. Got tired of being greasy all the time. So I went into just kind of load planning for an asset-based company. And we did some commercial accounts. We did the children's books and things like that, and just some local stuff with Anheuser-Busch. But it was interesting, and I found the chaos that I loved about food service in logistics and trucking. Love the fast pace because things don't get boring, and it's just one of those industries that I kind of fell into it, and I can't imagine doing anything else now. I think I'd be bored.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely one of those industries that once you're here, you stay here. So
Yeah,
it's hard to think about leaving.
it
So
is. It is.
um,
I can
yeah, it's cool. And I like what you said too about how it's like multifaceted. It always challenges you because that's how I feel too. It's always moving. There's always something new. Once you think that you
imagine.
know not even everything, but a lot of things, it
Yeah.
changes again and it evolves. And so it definitely keeps you on your toes. You're
It
never
does.
bored here
No,
in transportation.
ever, ever. I used to be in a training role previously, and I had one of the new hires ask me. He's like, because when I explain logistics to people that have no experience, I tell them you are constantly putting a puzzle together, and all throughout the day and all throughout the week, pieces of your puzzle fall out. Trucks break down, customers pull back shipments. Things just happen. It's just transportation. We are at the mercy of weather and traffic and mechanical things and human error and all of that. So I had a guy ask me one day, and it surprised me because all the people I've trained in my career, only one person has asked me this. He said, "So what happens once you get your puzzle put together?" And I didn't know how to answer that at first. And I'm like, I've never had my puzzle put together. I've been doing
Yeah.
this for a long time. I've never had my puzzle together. And I told him, I said, well, you ever get to the point that your puzzle is completely put together, you just scoot it over and drop it on the floor because you're going to have to do it all
Just
over.
put a match to it, see what happens.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
it's like one of those, like you're almost to the end and
Uh-huh.
the box is empty, but there's
Mhm.
one space left, and you're like, I don't know where that piece is.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. That's exactly what it's like. But I mean, it's what we do, and that's what keeps me coming back day after day is I'm not bored.
Mhm.
And I think that's the best analogy I can think of as far as it is. I don't think it matters what role you're in, what role you're in, because we are constantly changing. Trucking has changed so much since I stepped foot in this 26 years ago.
Mm.
It's just insane. But I love it.
And you've been in a lot of different parts of the industry, which I thought
Mhm.
was really cool, including some like military quality manager role
Yeah.
type stuff. I love doing these interviews because even though like we've known each other for a few years and we have a lot of chats, I'm like, let me just fully creep on your LinkedIn and your history dig out things. But I thought that was really cool. And I'm sure that especially with the military side of stuff, you probably have a lot of experience processing rules and regulations and making sure you're following them. How has that
Mhm.
served you? Or I guess A, is that true, or am I just shooting in the dark?
Oh
Or
no,
B,
it's true.
how has it served you as you continue your career?
I will say that when I first got into it, so I went into unfortunately the gentleman I told you about at the beginning, he passed away. His kids sold his company off, so that kind of left me, in the dust, and I needed to figure out what I was going to do next. And I still wanted to find that hustle and that thrill and that constant chaos. So I started working. I went into like household goods moving, and I worked for a company up in Ohio, big United company, and we ended up doing not household goods stuff, but we had commercial contracts with other companies. I worked on site for a computer reseller. So they would, when major corporations would upgrade their computers, we would send in movers basically to go in, pack everything up. They'd bring it in, wipe everything clean, and then they resell it. And that was interesting because that was a whole different side of commercial logistics that didn't involve people. It was commercial accounts instead of personal accounts and things like that. So that was a different beast altogether. But I learned all of that, and then I down in the Panhandle. I moved down to Florida in '07, worked in the Panhandle, and I worked for a moving and storage company down there, Fort Walton Beach. And I kind of fell in because I had the experience. They hired me and they're showing me how they do business. And I kind of fell into the scoring side of military household goods moves. So when a service member goes to a different duty station, whether it's a temporary duty station or a permanent change of station, um, they bring their orders in to what's called a personal property office for the military. The military looks at all the regulations that they have based off of their rank, if they're married, their entitlements, all that stuff, and then they set up a move. So the company that I worked for actually did these moves, and I got to go out on site a couple times at NAS in Pensacola, and I got to see how our local movers go in and pack them up and what kind of scores we need to adhere to and the standards and all of that. And it was really neat. But a big part of my job then was I would submit these scores to the bases because as long as we scored well, we got more freight, which is, I mean, how it should be. If you're doing a good job, be rewarded for it. And I think I hadn't been there that long. And the master sergeant on NAS in Pensacola called me. I thought I was in trouble because he called me and he's like, April, this is Mr. Shields. I need you to come out here and talk to me. And I was like, uh-oh, because this is the guy that I actually send everything to. So I cleared my schedule. I went out to see him. We sat and talked, and he said, every score that we send you, if it's not 100%, you appeal it and you dig through my regulations and find a loophole. And I said, yes, sir, that's what I'm supposed to do. He goes, well, I'm kind of getting tired of you working against me, so I'd really like it if you came to work for me. So I did. I got a job as a civilian working on NAS in Pensacola, worked in the personal property office, got into, household goods transportation and all that stuff. That was a really cool job because I got to meet so many service members. They bring their orders in, we talk about their families, where they're going, where they've been. That was probably one of my favorite jobs as far as, the clientele, the people. You're serving the service members, and that was incredible. But I do think that feel like I do feel like it put me on a good path to adhere to regulations, because something like military movements, you have to be to a T. Everything has to be detailed. You could be in a lot of trouble. So I feel like that's really put me on a path to, I mean, it's helped me think about SOPs in business, what we can do to get things uniform and be on the same page. And that was a lot of what that job was for me. So I feel like it was key to my career and my growth was experiencing that.
Well, I love that story, and I meant to message you about this before we went on the official record. But my best friend actually served active Navy military, and she was in Pensacola, and she got her wings there. So I actually
That's
have
awesome.
been to that base. And then her and her husband actually got married at the Pensacola military base.
I
Like,
love it.
so, I'll tell you more about that story when we're not officially on the record, but it was really cool. And it's like Pensacola is actually a really cute town. Like I
Mhm.
had never really like walked, but they had like an art walk the weekend of their wedding and stuff. And so
Yeah.
we did that. And the day before her wedding, we went to the olive oil store and I made her sample, like close her eyes and sample all the olive oil. And so we just like laughed, like, what did you do before your rehearsal dinner? Like walked around town with my best friend and sampled olive oil as one does. Um, so but
Nice.
I think that's really cool. And like you said, like it has to be my husband is in engineering and he has military contract and it has to be precise and you have to
Yes.
really pay attention to all the rules and regulations. And everything changed, like we talked at the beginning of this, it everything changes and moves. And so I
Mhm.
thought, she probably is really on top of things like that because
Yeah,
of that experience.
absolutely. It's definitely served me well. And if you ever want good reading material to go to sleep at night, pull out the JFTR for the military. It's the Joint Federal Travel Regulations. That's definitely a way to go to sleep. Just dig into that and read
I will keep that in mind when I have my insomnia evenings.
them. Right, right.
Um, so one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the move was we were sitting at this year's TMSA Elevate in
Mhm.
New Orleans, and we talked a lot about being a manager and what that means and how your
Right.
management style has really changed over the years. And you were so open and honest and vulnerable about that shift that I was like,
Yeah,
hey, let's publicly talk about that because that isn't something that we always do is admit, hey, like I didn't go about things the
right.
best I could, and then go into that evolution. So, can you tell us a little bit more about that experience?
Yeah. I mean, I believe the words that I use I won't use on the show here, but um I was a jerk. I was a jerk because I mean I can tell you and you know because you're in this industry that being a woman in logistics can at times be difficult. It's definitely changed over the past 26 years. We see I see a lot more women in different positions, which is absolutely amazing. I love everything about it. I don't feel so out of place anymore. Um, but I'm a little bit older and I've been doing this for a long time. And my role models or my bosses were always the traditional man. And it's everybody gets beat until morale improves. And you just have to keep beating on people to get them to be productive. And that's the way that I was taught. So that's the way I thought it needed to be. Um, and I was difficult. I think back about it and I am not proud at all because I was told you have to get on people and stay on them to get them to be productive. And then I don't know, I want to say it was about 4 or 5 years ago, I started thinking a lot about watching people's reactions. I was training new hires, I was helping people out, and a lot of these people that came in were my son's age.
Mm.
So I started thinking, man, what if Nicholas calls me because he's in the workforce? What if he calls me and tells me that his boss treats him the way that I treat some of these people? And it was eye-opening because I mean, as a parent, you never want your kid to go through
Mm.
being reprimanded, and even when they're wrong, you still have a soft spot for, okay, we could have gone about that differently. But I mean, that was what I knew. So, and that's what my mentors did, and that's what my bosses did, and we didn't have a work-life balance. It was you hustled and you made money and all of that stuff, and you were happy and growing, and but you didn't realize the negativity from that type of culture and what that does to people. And I think you know just realizing you can incentivize people and do positive things for them, and they're actually more productive that way. That was a huge eye opener. That was life changing for me. And that it really made me step back and think about things like something as small as buying someone lunch when they do a good job, something as small as recognizing when they do a good job. That stuff goes a long way. And it to the people, it means so much more to your people when they do get that recognition. You don't have to pat them on the back every time they do something right, but acknowledge it. It means a lot. And I personally got to see when I started changing. I didn't make a big announcement and say, hey, I'm not going to be a jerk today.
Yeah. So, whatever you said about me in the past, we'll just null and void that new process moving forward.
Right. So it was something that I kind of dipped my toe in to see, are my superiors going to see this and are they going to come down on me for it? Are my people even going to recognize it because I've got this reputation with them? Are they going to notice that things have changed? So I didn't make a grand gesture about it, but I went about implementing small changes and recognizing people for doing things. And it's a big deal when somebody comes in on a weekend to cover a load that got handed back. That's huge. Yes, they should do it if it's their account. Nonetheless, I don't feel like we should ride people until we burn them out. I mean, there's no future in that. It's not sustainable. If you like them and they do a good job, one thing that I've realized, and this is, reading books and trying things out, of course, is capitalize on people's strengths.
Mm-hmm.
If you capitalize on their strengths, it makes them happy. If it's we're all different. Some people want to be doing the same thing day in and day out. They don't want to grow. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Put them in a position where they're happy and they thrive and they become some of the most productive people for you.
Mm-hmm.
But not everybody is that way. And that was another thing is realizing what a jerk I was to people. Taking a step back and looking at that and thinking, how is this going to change? Is it going to be bad? Is it going to be good? And then finally, it just started becoming part of our meetings where, we're going to recognize what people are doing. We're going to reward for what people are doing. I mean, I wrote an entire auditing program, live auditing, it's kind of tough to do in transit for shipments because this business, whether we like it or not, is reactive quite a bit. So we try to be as proactive as we can. And then I put a live auditing program in place. And instead of it being, oh, you missed these couple things, these trackable items, you missed these, so we're going to reprimand you. It was the team with the best score got lunch for the week. So just small changes. And instead of coming down on people and being a jerk, and when they see you, they're not happy to see you.
Mm.
I feel like that was another step in my career that elevated me. It took me even further. And it was a hard pill to swallow. And I did. Some of the people that I targeted, I have called them or I've texted them and said, hey, I know I was a jerk and thanks for putting up with me and I'm sorry. I realize that that's not the way to do things. And some people are receptive to it. And sometimes I've gotten the middle finger coming back at me. But either way, I don't see the point in it. I can say I guess I'd be a reformed jerk, but I do see where I was wrong in all of that, and I believe it's made me a better manager. Absolutely.
I just love the self-reflection of it because I think a lot of times, even if we have the best of intentions, it doesn't always come out that way. I know when Tiffany started here at TMSA, I had worked by myself for 18 months here. There's not a single thing that needed to really come out of my head on an everyday basis. Right. And she is a person who we call it TK for Tiffany Knowledge. She probably is not thrilled out telling the story, but it just is like she likes to know everything. Like she wants to understand our processes and why we do the things that we do so she can help improve them or really understand why we do them so she can understand the membership better. It's all great things. But we'll call it TK because then I include in if I'm not giving enough information, and because I recognize that's something that she needs. But it was a huge shift for me because day-to-day
Right.
operations was just me living in my head all the time. So it does take time to figure out how to work best together and make sure that you're giving the information that you need. And I use a puzzle analogy, which is funny, but it's very different than the one you
Uh-huh.
talked about at the beginning. I think it's really important for our team members to understand their puzzle piece in the
Mhm.
overall puzzle,
Right.
but also how their puzzle piece connects to the other puzzle pieces.
Mhm.
So somewhere for us, like TMSA, we have a really small headquarters, and we have a larger membership, and we want to provide even more for the membership. And there's steps that I'm taking today that is working towards other pieces.
Mhm.
But so I have to make sure that I take a step back and be like, hey, this is why I'm asking you to do these things. It probably makes no sense right now, but this is where we're building to. These are the
Right.
puzzle pieces that are around your puzzle piece that don't
Yeah.
exist. They are trapped in a box that we don't own yet. And so
Right.
those are shifts in my own leadership and management, is remembering to do things like that. And it's not because like people are nosy, or because they just want to understand with
Yeah.
the work that they're working so hard at and everything that they're doing in their day to day, how does
Yeah.
that fit into the overall scope of the company? And
Yeah.
so that's something that took me a while to learn in my journey too. And it wasn't like I felt like I was being a jerk or anything like that. I just
Right.
wasn't used to having to tell anyone anything on a regular basis because it was
Right.
just me. And of course, like there's, committee members and board members, and I do report outs, but like that day in and day out. And that's when I was hiring for that position. I told everyone who applied, I was like, if you don't like me, just cut the interview short because I'm the person you have to talk to every day. So if you don't find me enjoyable, and so I think that's important on small teams too, to see
Yeah.
how people fit. And I like what you said, like utilize the skill set of your team and recognize that. I think those
Yes.
are really important too. And know what people are passionate about and what they like doing and what they're good at.
Mhm.
Because that's how you're going to get the most happy team and the most
Yes.
effective team.
Yeah. I mean, I get up to work every single day, and I'm thankful and I'm excited and I'm happy. And I can tell you that when I was that type of person, when I constantly had to beat down on people to feel like, I'm doing what my bosses want me to do, or whatever, I wasn't happy. I
Mhm.
mean, golly, I realized how much I dragged that into my personal life. Um, I mean, I can't say I wasn't happy. I was happy, but nothing like, I mean, that whole mental shift in realizing that I don't have to come down on someone to get them to be productive, and we can do it in a positive manner, that spills over into your personal life,
Mhm.
so it goes hand in hand. We both, all of us, you carry work home with you.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know, I feel like it's rewarding. It's a pivot that was long overdue, and I'm so thankful that I was able to, I listened to people around me, and started really looking at everything, and realizing, and I haven't been treated the best either. Everyone, I'm sure, has a story about what their boss did to them or upset them, and I think I just got to the place where I just didn't want to be that story anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how you started small,
Mhm.
making these incremental changes. Um, how has that shift now helped you become a better leader, a better manager? And what were some of those tinier steps that you took in case people are thinking about making some of these changes?
It was really just a trial and error thing. I mean, I didn't want it to be a shock value. I didn't want it to interrupt my team. I didn't want it to be, some of the people, I guess let's just put it, I my boss would call me when I left work, and sometimes I was there till 7 or 8 at night. He would call me, and we would sit on the phone about everything I'm doing wrong until about 10 p.m.
Mm.
And I didn't want it to be a grand gesture because I didn't want consequences of that. So I decided to do just small things, and it was just a trial and error, you know, talking to people aside from reprimanding them for something was a big step for me because they're used to only hearing from me when something's wrong.
Mhm.
But getting involved, I used to sit with people and say, "Hey, how can I help you?" And because they were used to how I was, they're like, "Oh God, is what's happening? Am I
This
in
is the
trouble?
step.
Is something being
Yeah.
wrong?" And it just making the small changes, like I would write it down, what I'm gonna do, how I'm gonna do it, how I'm going to initiate it. And I kept a little journal of, hey, this is what I tried today. This was the outcome. Maybe this wasn't the right way. Keep fishing for another way to make it more positive, to kind of turn it around because it was my team and that was my responsibility to turn everything around. Um, I think if I would have done it in a grand gesture, no one would have taken it serious just
Mhm.
because of the history there and how I was before. But keep a journal, write it down, try it out. If it doesn't work, don't stop. I mean, not everyone is the same. You have to learn your people. And that was another thing is I realized I had to get to know my people. I knew about
Mhm.
their spouses and if they had kids, but I didn't know recitals and important things and the things that are really I was the boss that when you said, hey, my kids got this going on at 7 p.m., I got to get out of here. I was judging them like, well, the rest of everybody else is still sitting here, and thinking about that stuff because I did miss a lot with my son growing up because I'm in transportation. I
Mhm.
took for granted that my mom always went. But looking back on it, and then of course I had a mentor that it's kind of like a full circle thing. When I started a job a long time ago, they warned me about him. Oh, he's a jerk, he's this, he's that. And he was, but over the years I got to watch him, I wouldn't say soften up, I got to watch him transition and become a mentor instead of a boss.
Mhm.
And that was another thing that showed me that hey, it's okay, because this guy that I looked at like was the biggest jerk I knew but was a successful big jerk. um I watched him start to put family first and people first and all of that, and I started to realize, hey, maybe there's something to this. you know Maybe we can still be productive without people hating me at the end of every day or not even wanting to come in because they know I'm in the office that day.
Mhm.
So just small changes, stay consistent with it. And eventually, you know what, if your team doesn't buy into it, maybe you're not in the right team.
Mhm.
That's just my opinion because it has made a huge difference in my personal life as well.
Yes, I think trust is really important in the
Hmm.
workplace. I could see if you did do the big grand gesture that it could come off really disingenuous
Yes.
because and people wouldn't trust it. So I think
Right.
that like baby steps at last year's executive summit, we had Corey Shear was our keynote, and he talked about organizational trust and how important it is, and it was
Hmm.
really well received by our audience because
I
it's
bet.
something I and it is this is a really tough market and a tough
Hmm.
it can be a tough and harsh environment. And so,
Yeah.
and we have seen many cases, especially over the past couple years, of huge changes at companies that the employees find out about it from news articles and not from their companies.
Right.
And so building that up a little bit at a time. I've read a book about generations in the workplace and how
Hmm.
there's differences now where the people coming into the job market don't have inherent trust of because
Right.
they grew up watching all of the
Hmm.
news, all of the leaders who did all of the bad things. And so
Right.
just because you have a president title or a CEO or a leader, they don't just like kind of fall at your feet the way we did
Right.
when we
Yeah.
started. And you have to earn that trust no matter who you are.
Hmm.
So I think all of these things are really, really important. And if you are thinking about making those changes, doing them a little bit at a time, seeing what works is a great kind of path to success.
Yeah. You have to get people bought in. If they're not bought into what they're doing or what you're doing, it's I think it's going to be a constant struggle.
Mm-hmm.
So, leading with positivity and showing people that that is genuine, and that's the direction that you're going to go in, and all of that. I think it does help people become bought into everything, the whole thing, how business is done. Positions and titles have never been really important to me. It's the person. It's how I'm treated. It's how I'm treating people. Um, get people bought into it, and they'll be fine. Everyone will be fine. But that buy-in is tough, especially when you're trying to transition from being a boss. I I see the memes, and I know it's cliche that everyone says there's a difference between a boss and a leader, and there is. It's true. Um, but it will definitely help to transition from a boss role to a leader role when you become more compassionate and you get your people bought into what you're doing and how you do business.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how I got into the negative part of everything, and treating people that way, because I had incredible mentors at McDonald's as a kid when I was in my teens and my 20s working there. And it was, we did have the people from corporate that came in that you feel like they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what happens in a store because they sit in an office all day. But buy-in, be your authentic self. I hear that all the time, and it's just so true. Be authentic with your people, be honest with them, be transparent where you can be. I know that there are things that upper management talks about. But one thing I can tell you that I respected in my career was working for someone who was involved in a lot of meetings, and they would come out of the meeting and be like, "Hey, I just want you guys to know that meeting," because people sit and talk. They see you in an office and they see all the upper management people sitting there, and they're like, "Oh no." And you think about the economy that we're in, and what's happening in transportation, and oh man, we see these people talking. Are they closing the doors? Are we getting laid off? Do I need to look for a job?
Mm-hmm.
Be transparent. I've had people come out and say, "Hey, I know what the optics are of this, but everything is fine." Be transparent with your people. Don't lie to them.
Mm-hmm.
Be open and honest, and then they become bought into what you do. And sometimes I found my best performers in the people I thought were the worst.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I haven't been a leader or a boss for many years in my career. This is still newer since coming in to
Mhm.
TMSA, but I had a belief in what the organization could be, and I wanted to throw my hat into that. But since coming into this position, I definitely try to lead with humanity
Mhm.
first. Like
Yep.
I'm a human first, and then everything else comes after. Um, because yeah, everyone has their own stories and their own things going on behind the scenes that we will only probably know a fraction of. And so
Right.
if we can just lead that way first, I think it has a huge impact. And I think that's really important. So I think
Yep.
that's cool that you learned that. Um, so the last question I always ask anyone on the show is kind of funny because I feel like your whole interview has been about this, but I like to ask people if you could go back in time and advise a younger April anything personally or professionally, what would you go back and say? So I guess my question to you would be like beyond just like you don't have to be a jerk to be successful
Right.
but because you've already answered that. That's
Yeah.
like that's something you would probably say, but
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. You can be productive with positivity, and leading and teaching people the right things, and how to do it, and all of that. I think if I had to tell myself something when I was younger, if I could go back, it would be take the time.
mm,
Take the time. Take off work. Do things. I mean, there were times where I didn't use vacation. Create a balance, because if this industry is truly what you love and you love doing it, then put yourself in a position so that it's sustainable.
mhm,
The trucking industry, the transportation logistics professionals have one of the highest rates of heart attacks and strokes and high blood pressure and all of that other stuff, because everything that we do is so stressful, um, time sensitive, and and detail oriented and all of that stuff. I think that a lot of people that don't have that inside look at transportation and logistics don't understand everything that's involved in it. So if I were to go back to my younger self and say something, it would be to take the time. I would take my time off. I would focus more on things that my son was doing. I missed a lot. Just take time out for me and don't make everything about work. You have to create that balance. And up until 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't think a work-life balance existed. You just, it's kind of ingrained to run as hard as you can and do as much as you can. But I think one thing I would tell myself is just take that time. Take it for you. Take it for your family. If you don't have kids, you don't have a significant other, do it for you.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think that's really great advice and something I'm still learning how to do.
It's difficult. It's difficult. And you know what? Because of how you're programmed and who you are, you're always going to feel guilty for it.
Yes. But I do think the balance is good. I feel like for me, I was actually explaining this. It's also about finding time for yourself.
Yes.
Because as a wife and a mother and a professional and an auntie and a sister and a daughter, the Jen is what often will be forgotten about, and she's pretty important too. So that's my plight for this year, is to remembering to take time for yourself and like sleep and like do things like that. So I think that that's really good advice, is to take the time no matter what that means, and to be able to do that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. If anyone listening is interested in being a guest on the show, you can, let's see if I put my finger in the right place. You can scan this QR code up here to be a guest, and the link will also be in the show notes. If you want to be more engaged in the TMSA community, you can register for Executive Summit, and that you can go at events.tmsatoday.org. Executive Summit is for director level and above. We have lots of exciting things going on. We have a sustainability session. Every other year, TMSA does a benchmarking study, and we'll be diving into that and discussing what that actually means and all kinds of exciting things. It's going to be October 10th through 11th in Hoboken, New Jersey this year. So go ahead and get yourself registered. And then if you just want to get more involved in the organization holistically, you can do that too at tmsatoday.org/get involved. That is all my spiels for the day, but really excited to have